Well, I'm excited to have my latest guest onto the podcast, Sarah Paiji Yoo, who is the co-founder of Blueland. And as I like to do at the beginning of every episode, Sarah would be so kind to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Like Greg mentioned, I'm Sarah Paiji Yoo. I'm co-founder and CEO of Blueland. And Blueland is reimagining cleaning products and personal care products to eliminate single-use plastic. Most cleaning products are up to 90% water and purchase in a new plastic bottle every time. And, we're so proud of our extensive innovation, which has enabled us to be the first in the world to bring a dry refill tablet to market. And that's across a range of categories, from cleaning sprays to hand soap to dish and laundry, and more recently, body wash and face wash. These refill tablets, if you can imagine, are really easy to use. They're designed to be mixed with tap water that you already have at home. And the beauty of the dry tablet is that we can package them in paper instead of plastic. And by removing the water from these formulas, we've completely eliminated the need for plastic packaging, and also just drastically reduced the carbon emissions associated with shipping these products around. And we've been live, I guess maybe additional context, we've been live for about 4 years. And in just those 4 years, we're proud to have diverted over 2 billion single-use plastic bottles from our landfills and oceans.
Thank you for sharing that with us. But as I understand it, when you were growing up, you wanted to be a pediatrician.
That is correct. I feel like all my life until almost junior year in college, I thought I was going to be a doctor, namely a pediatrician. I was good at school, I was good at working and studying hard. And I don't know, I think, becoming a doctor was a very common, my parents both immigrated here from my mom from Korea, my dad from Thailand. And it's just a very common kind of immigrant archetype of, both being successful and doing good in the world. And, I love children. And so it seemed like a natural career to gravitate towards. Especially at an age. And it's funny. I feel like kids are always asked, like, what do they want to be when they grow up? And so that felt like a good, potentially like very correct answer to that question.
But somewhere along the lines at Harvard, you decided to switch into business and economics. Is that right?
That's correct. So I went to Harvard for undergrad, which was also, honestly, a dream come true for me. I think I was also very set on going to Harvard from a very young age. And when I got there, I think I was just astounded by the range of subjects and areas that I could study and spend my time there engaged in. And, with pre-med, there's a lot of prerequisite courses. And honestly, for me, it was more driven by it felt like a shame to spend all my time just in the sciences. And I was interested in exploring so much more. And I think that was the first time that I really started to, question sort of my, being dead set on becoming a doctor. And I decided to switch into economics, which is, the most popular major at Harvard. And kind of thought that potentially a path in business would just give me a bit more latitude to explore sort of a wider range of interests.
And that then took you to McKinsey, and I'm trying to paint this picture to understand sort of when the aha moment of business really captured you. Was it during your time at McKinsey?
It's funny. I think it wasn't. I don't know when this idea of business captured me. I think for a long time, I was optimizing for optionality. Honestly, I was in my heart of hearts knowing that I hadn't found the thing that I was so excited to commit the rest of my life to. And we spend a lot of our waking hours working. And I think I just wanted to keep as many doors open. And so McKinsey, seemed like a great place to go where I'd be able to touch and, work in a range of different industries and a range of different functions, and hopefully figure out from there what it was that I want to do next. I think at McKinsey, wonderful experience, work with, to this day, I think, one of the smartest groups of folks that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Learned so much. I think it was great to be at a larger company that had the structure to train me and mentor me. But I also knew, my heart of hearts, like pretty quickly while I was there, when I got there, that I wasn't going to be a lifer, that I didn't want to become a career consultant. And, McKinsey, like many of these types of firms, often out of undergrad, there is a sort of like 2 to 3 year program, which is good. It kind of set the clock for me to start thinking about what it was that I might want to do next if I didn't want to just stay and try to go for partner. I know one of the things that at McKinsey I felt not as like wholly satisfied with was, the role of the consultant and, the role that you play in the services or financial services space where you're coming in, you're providing, you're working hard and caring deeply about the recommendation you provide. And then, it's out of your hands, whether that company decides to pursue that recommendation and how they decide to execute that, and you kind of move on to your next project. And I think I wanted a bit more agency in my work. I wanted to, if I did believe that, path A was the right path, then I wanted to, be able to help ensure that it happened. And that's what got me interested in private equity, which is the next step that I took in my career. I just assumed that because private equity firms oftentimes have majority interests and own, these private companies, that I would be able to, play a role and have a bit more agency in, helping come up with, great strategies and ideas and help, execute them and help create that value. And
But
so
that didn't necessarily play out as you had hoped.
no, it didn't. It didn't. I think, also unsurprisingly, like, a lot of private equity is investing. And that is where I ended up spending most of my time. I was, working in a private equity firm, you're not an operator. I was an investor first and foremost. And so, I spent most of my time evaluating deals, deep in the financial model. And again, it's another one where I, would do it all again. I learned so much from that experience that I have taken with me, and I still lean on those skill sets quite heavily. But that said, I just wasn't, I didn't want to be a long-term investor. And I still stand by that. I think people always ask me, like, now that I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade, like, would you ever go into VC investing? And I've definitely been approached by no shortage of VC funds. And I just don't like investing. I don't know what it is. I don't. I like being sort of more involved, more in the weeds, and frankly, I don't think I don't think I'm driven by money enough. And I think that's that's honestly a big piece of investing as well. Generating outsized returns, and it's one of those things that doesn't excite me.
So you got lots of experience from these two roles, and then it was as I saw, it was go back to business school, and not necessarily for the education, but for the time to reset.
Yes. So that's right. So after private equity, also sort of like right out of one other experience, a lot of times it is a program. People usually stay for 2 to 3 years if they're not going to continue on the partner track. And at that point, I still didn't know what it was I wanted to do. I think it's very hard to figure that out when you're working in a very intense role in industry. And so I also thought it was unrealistic for me to stay in private equity at the same time, be interviewing and figuring out, what, pretty major career change I wanted to make. And so I decided to go to business school and decided to go to Harvard, but it really was for a more unconventional reason. For me, it really was just to take a break. I had the finance background. I got a great business background at McKinsey. I wasn't looking to go to HBS to pick up any particular skill sets. Honestly, it's a very overpriced break that I was signing up for. But I think there's a part of me that I'd always been quite risk averse. I'd always been quite square, to be honest. And it just seemed like a good way for me to both be able to take that break, but also get credit, because I can say that I was in business school. But I was most interested in going to business school to really be able to step back, have the time to reflect, have conversations with peers that came from a wide range of industries. And the goal was really to figure out what it was that I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
So I'm smiling here because I don't think most people normally equate risk averse with business owner, with entrepreneurship. So how did you make that? How did you get out of that comfort zone?
Yeah. So, when I went to business school, I just assumed that ultimately I was going to end up at a company somewhere, and then I was going to climb a very long corporate ladder until my early 60s. And I thought going to business school, I was going to just try to figure out what industry did I want to be in, and what function did I want to be in? Did I want to be in marketing? Did I want to be in ops? Did I want to be a brand manager? And did I want to be in CPG, or did I want to be at a fashion brand, et cetera? But I did know that I wanted to be, somewhere fast paced, working with smart people, where, I could see and be seen. And, I think I was very fortunate to be going to Harvard Business School at a really exciting time for female entrepreneurship. I think in just the 2 to 3 years prior to my getting there, there had been, a healthy track record of female entrepreneurs starting their businesses right out of HBS. So, the founders of Gilt Group and Rent the Runaway and LearnVest and Bobble Bar and Birchbox, and the Stitch Fix founder was starting to work on her business there, and she was just a year ahead of me. And, I think that was so helpful. I do think that there is something to that notion of you have to see it to be it. I think I messed that up, but I think it was so powerful for me to see these other women who looked like me, who had very similar work experiences to me, that were now just going out and doing it. It really demystified it for me. Many of them actually came back and spoke to students at HBS while I was there. So the Rent the Runway founders came back and shared their experience of how they got started. And it was helpful because I was like, oh, you literally just bought all these dresses and started letting women in sororities borrow them, and you just started dry cleaning them over and over again. And you just took the next natural step, right? And at the same time, they just went out and they were able to raise venture capital. And I think seeing that, hearing all of that was so inspiring for me. And I realized that, starting a business also checked many of the boxes of what I was looking for in terms of fast paced, being able to wear, many different hats. And yeah, I think that's when I realized wow, here I am at business school. I actually have a lot of free time on my hands, because I had also explicitly told myself I'm not going to take my classwork seriously. That's not what I'm here to do. That's not what I'm prioritizing. And so I thought I should try to start a business in business school, because I knew I was too risk averse to ever leave a full-time job to go start something. And so I thought hey, I should start something now while at HBS.
So it didn't start with the idea first. It started with the notion, here's a great environment to be able to do that.
Yes.
So how did you come up with so Snapette was your first business. How did you come up with that as the idea?
Yeah, so Snapette was my first startup. And honestly, it was an exciting time. I had just gotten an iPhone for the first time when I got to business school. Just my first iPhone. Previously, I was on a BlackBerry for work.
And what year is this?
This is 2010. Mary Meeker from Morgan Stanley is making these bold predictions about how the world is going to shift to mobile, how, I think at that point we were still at maybe like 10% of internet browsing was happening on mobile. And she was saying that number is going to go to 30%. And then eventually mobile was going to eclipse desktop. And it was hard. I don't know if folks can put themselves in their shoes 2010, but it was really hard to believe that we were going to spend that much more time on the internet through our phones. And if you remember, like our phones were also, even the iPhone, it was still a very small screen. It was still a lot slower. But I think for me, finally getting off the BlackBerry, getting onto the iPhone really opened my eyes to like, wow, we are all walking around with extremely powerful computing devices. It's like, you're walking around with a laptop. And I definitely saw all the opportunities there were for a whole host of new innovation to connect people to the world around them, because now you're walking around with the iPhone. And so, I was thinking a lot about mobile. I was thinking a lot about how mobile was going to change my own life. And that's how the original idea for Snapette came about, where Snapette was all about connecting people to retail inventory around them, to break it down in a more accessible way. For example, if I need a red dress for this weekend, you can go on Google, find a bunch of options in my price point, in my size, check out, and I'm done, right? I think still today you have the issue of like, I can be out in Soho in New York City and I need a red dress. And undoubtedly there are many options probably around me that I would love at my price point, but it's really hard to do that local physical search. And the idea for Snapette was to help you search and discover products in the physical world around you. And so we started with the fashion vertical, really helping people see what was in the stores around them, as well as what product, and do product search in the area around them.
And so how did it go? How did it go building that business?
Yeah, it was a fun and wild ride. I think I learned a lot in that process that I've then taken to my more recent entrepreneurial ventures. I think what we were trying to solve, it's very much so chicken or the egg, right? It's a marketplace, right? Like if you want people to get onto the app, you need to have robust information or content, right? For the content, like we needed to work with the brands and retailers to ingest their local inventory feeds, and to attract large retailers and brands. They're going to want to know like how many people are using the app.
Right.
And so I think that was a really fun challenge to tackle. Ultimately, we ended up starting like hyper local in just San Francisco, in New York, and going after local like fashion boutiques, and then kind of like climbing that ladder of like getting a really great name boutique to get us an amazing name boutique that then initially attracted the first brand. And, ultimately we were able to get a few hundred of the top brands and retailers on, everyone from Nordstrom to Saks to Gap, et cetera. And we had about, I guess, over 2 million monthly actives at the point that we sold the business. So that was, all fine and well. And we were kind of like scaling both sides, the supply side and demand side of the marketplace. I think what I didn't realize enough was at that period of time, there was a lot of focus on, Instagram actually launched right at the same time at Snapette. I think we launched like literally 2 months apart. And there were a lot of apps like that where the focus really was on the business model. It was just like, go viral, get as many users as you can, and you can figure the rest out later, right? It's no different from Facebook and so many of these other social networks. I did not realize that, obviously the business model needed to work, right? And that's where, like, once I was in it, I started to realize, great, we signed up Nordstrom. That was a huge win. They were paying us $100,000 in our first year to have Nordstrom on, which very exciting for like a team of 4 when we're getting started. But when I went back to Nordstrom the next year and, tried to, increase our package with them, understandably, they want to understand how many customers are you driving to Nordstrom. And the tricky thing there is that in order to factually answer that question, like they needed to provide a coupon or something, right? Like otherwise, like there's no way, even with like geolocation services, I can't with 100% confidence say like we drove this many people and this many people made purchases, and this is thus the value that we're driving to you. And that's where I started to realize like we were essentially building a media company, right? The model was no different from a media company or a company like Yelp, where you did need just a massive number of users. And yeah, it was very hard to scale, like to generate enough revenue to cover the cost of what it would cost to acquire a customer. So at that time, acquiring a mobile download was, $3 to $4. And that's where the math just didn't work. Like you could acquire a customer for $3 to $4. But it was then really hard to get paid exactly that much from a retailer.
So, part of the reason I started this podcast was to help what I call demystify the founder experience. So on the surface, if someone didn't know you and they'd see, oh, well, Sarah, you sold the business. You sold the business to somebody else. That isn't that very exciting? You must be very wealthy. You sold the business. But I think if you look under the hood a little bit more with Snapette, it wasn't necessarily the case. So I'd love for you to sort of help us understand that a little bit more, because not everything you read is what is the reality.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would say that it was still a good outcome, right? I think it wasn't life-changing, right? And I think it was certainly a struggle near the end, because when you do raise VC dollars, right? Like, I think it's really important for founders with any form of capital, not just VC capital, to understand the expectations that come with that capital. And, we, for example, raise money from amazing, incredible funds. Like Excel is like a blue chip household name VC, Forerunner is arguably one of the best consumer VCs out there. So that all sounded really great. But I think the outcomes that these VC firms, because of the business model, have to optimize for are very large outcomes, right? This is like they are making investments, hoping that you will be a unicorn, $1 billion company. And I would say a lot of times, certainly above 500 million. Right. I think the good news for us is the good and the bad news is that we hadn't raised that much. Right. We had just raised about $2 million, a seed round, where you can get really lost. So I think, these investors make a lot of bets, and understandably, they, as I would if I were in their shoes, then prioritize sort of their time and efforts around the ones that are going to be, the real outsized successes. So I think, certainly became clear in my mind that the business model didn't quite work. Like we couldn't, and that's where it's so important. Like you can't just count on going viral. That's not a business model, right? The business model is like, how much will it cost me to acquire a customer? And do I make more than that amount per customer that I acquire? And that, that is kind of like the tried and true way. One of the elements of scaling, but an important one. And I think I quickly realized that like that part of the business was really difficult. And so decided to not pursue another round, because kind of early on realized that like you pursue that round and you raise additional rounds, like those expectations just get higher and you just have even more pressure to be an even bigger business. And I think that's where, we did see a lot of businesses that raised in our cohort, back in between 2010 to 2014, you say, a lot of them played that game, hit incredible heights with revenue, but were just constantly raising, burning a lot of marketing. And then ultimately it didn't quite work out because the business model never made sense. And so we decided to step out of the game early. I would say earlier than most. So I think 3.5 years in, we did get an offer from a potential acquirer. I think the benefit that we had was that we were in mobile, and at that point, about 30%, 30 to 40% of internet traffic was coming through mobile, which is sizable. I think a lot of these companies were adjusting to. It used to be a very small percentage, and now it's very quickly 30 to 40%, and it's become very clear where the trajectory is going. And so, one of the largest shopping search engines at the time, PriceGrabber, reached out because they were interested in bringing in-house more mobile capabilities.
But it put you in a precarious situation, didn't it? Because here you are with somebody looking at you. Perhaps it means that you might, as I understand it, you were running out of money. Is that right?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely. And so it put us in a weird situation in a lot of regards, I would say. I think, unless you're selling your company for, I would say $50 million plus, like it's hard to get support. Like you talk about you're going to sell your company. Bankers want to sell, bankers make a cut of what's sold. There's a threshold at which it makes sense to spend time on a company. So if you're looking to sell your company for, $10 to $40 million, you're kind of like, out on your own. It's really hard to find someone to support you in that. I think, fortunately, I had spent 2 summers at Goldman Sachs in investment banking, and a lot of my time in private equity was both not only investing in companies, but then also selling our portfolio companies. So I uniquely did have a skill set where I understood what a confidential information memorandum looked like and what a sales presentation looked like when you're selling a company. I knew what the steps in the process were. I knew what a LOI or a letter of intent was. And so I effectively, became a banker selling my own company. And at least I knew enough to be dangerous, but that was still, it was a lot. It was very hard. But we had made this decision that we weren't going to raise more, because it certainly didn't make sense to raise more if we were going to then sell the business. But we cut it not even we cut it close. We overshot to the extent that, so I ran a process. Essentially, I reached out to other companies that were similar to this company that was interested, as well as more broadly. Like I Hail Married, and we were dropping emails and getting introed over to like Amazon, to Yahoo, to like Instagram, to like anyone that could make sense. And again, chalk it up to, founder exuberance and optimism. You have to always be optimistic. But reached out to a wide range of folks, had a handful that were interested, ultimately did get a letter of intent, an LOI and an offer from PriceGrabber. And that still starts at the beginning of the process, right? At that point, they and we were exclusive, and they would then, engage in sort of the full diligence, including legal and accounting due diligence. And, that whole process took longer than I would have expected and certainly would have liked. And that's what happened was just what you said. We ended up running out of money. We were in a tough situation where when you are then engaged in that exclusive diligence, like you are, especially near the end, sending over financial updates quite regularly, because you are an asset they're about to purchase. They need to understand like, where are you at from a revenue perspective? Where are you, including where are you from a cash perspective? So it's interesting because they clearly were seeing that we were getting to a point, our backs were against the wall, that, we were going to reach a point where we had no alternative option but to sell. I was in a tough position as a leader of the organization of, knowing where this was all going. And we had a 15-person team at the time. Many of them, had families, but regardless, whether you have family or not, the right thing to do is, these are people's lives, right? And, I had information about that would affect their livelihood. And so I remember 2.5 months prior to when we would run out of money, I remember getting the whole team together and letting everyone know exactly where we were from a financial position, and encouraging strongly encouraging the whole team to start looking for jobs that, I could not sit there and guarantee that the sale was going to go through. And I didn't even want to express like high confidence. I had high confidence that it was going to go through, but it wasn't the responsible thing for me to do, not knowing that it wasn't 100%. And, the team had a lot of questions for me. They did feel like it was going to go through. And ultimately, everyone decided to stay and continue working. And
quite a vote of confidence for you, on you.
I mean, I know it makes me emotional just to think back on that time. It was a very, there was a lot going on, but obviously was very concerned for the team and not just the company, but everyone stuck around. And, I told everyone that if this does go through, obviously I am going to work with the acquirer to make sure that everyone is back paid and we're getting everyone, very healthy raises on the other side. And thank goodness the deal went through and we were able to do that. We were able to make everyone whole. We were able to give everyone healthy raises. We retained the entire team. But just a crazy set of events because it's also hard. I mean, like you have an acquirer that's looking at you. A lot of the values in the talent, they're looking to acquire mobile capabilities. They're very interested in our development team. And if the team had walked, I think that greatly impacts the attractiveness of the asset they're looking to acquire. So, I definitely look back and feel like we absolutely threaded that needle.
So, successful sale of the business, Snapette, and then what happens? You take a break, you take a breather, you reset.
I was really excited about I was genuinely excited about life post acquisition and staying on. So myself and our whole team had a 1-year lockup with the acquirer. And I think it's always, again, I can always see the bright side. And I saw the merits of we had this incredible thing we wanted to do, but I felt like our whole, initial journey, we never had the time, money, or resources to do everything that we wanted to do as well as we wanted to do. And so, Price Grabber had, hundreds of people on their team. It was an extremely, a couple $100 million business. They had a massive engineering team. They had a massive sales team because they're a shopping search engine. They had a relationship with many retailers. And so, I just saw all of that as opportunity. I saw that we would be able to, make, innovate on our product even faster with some of the resources, bring on new customers at a faster clip. But it was so interesting because I feel like literally day one post acquisition, I just felt like everything came to a screeching halt, and the pace that we were then able to move all of a sudden slowed down dramatically. And, that engineering team that I was so excited to be able to take advantage of, we had to get in line, and it was like an 18-month roadmap that they were operating on, which was such a culture shock for me. Whereas, we would all my whole team would listen in on Apple's new updates, right, at the big conference that they would do, and then immediately get to work about what new features could we add based on the new things that were released. And I understood it as a person with a business background. I understood that, someone like Price Grabber that is generating so much revenue, they need to also prioritize accordingly and put their resources towards areas based on the projected financial impact. And we were just so small that, we were just it was going to be hard to get, our things prioritized in that context. And so, I think, and again, they were wonderful people. And I do talk probably on that time, but I think I was just itching to get back into early stage company building. And I also felt like I learned so much and I made so many mistakes, and I would be so much better the next time that I just want to, get back in the seat again. I didn't have an idea though. And it was in this period as my 1-year lockup was about to come up that I had reconnected with just I guess someone in the e-com fashion space that I had met during the Snapette journey. And these were the founders of Rue La La. It was one of the first flash sale sites that launched here in the US. They had a incredible exit, I think $300 million exit, like 18 months in. Prior to that, the founder CEO had founded and exited Lids, which is the incredible brick and mortar retailer with, I think, like 800 locations across malls in America, and incredibly charismatic gentleman. And he had this thesis, which I shared, that we were still in the early innings of direct to consumer. So at this point, it's like 2013. And Warby Parker was kind of like the example, one of the only few examples of direct to consumer. But we had the shared belief that we would continue to see whole categories, right? Whether it be toothbrushes, to tampons, et cetera, start moving direct to consumer, sold online. And he, wanted to raise money to start a studio because believed that there would be, a lot of infrastructure, shared resources that would be helpful across a range of these types of businesses. And so, I didn't have an idea, but I was excited to get back to, launching new businesses and brands. So I joined him as a founding partner of a startup studio called Launch. And it was a crazy set of years because we did exactly what we planned to do. And we launched one business per year. And that's what I did for the next 4 years.
That included Rockets of Awesome.
Yeah, that included M.Gemi, Rockets of Awesome, Full Lane, which is a clean beauty retailer. And then the last one that I helped launch was Trade, which is a coffee marketplace connecting third wave coffee roasters to coffee lovers around.
Okay, so you launched 4 businesses in 4 years. You started in 2014. That was.
Yes.
So we're 2018 now, and you say, this isn't enough. I need more. I need something. I need something else in my life.
Yeah. So really cut my teeth launching businesses for years. It was a crazy period in my life. I then became unexpectedly pregnant. I was married, not that you have to be married to have kids, but we were planning on having kids at some point. But yeah, we got pregnant, I guess earlier than expected. And it definitely was a moment for me to step back. I think I'd always been very open to this notion that I may feel my relationship with work may evolve after becoming a parent. I think, up to that point, I had been an entrepreneur for many years, a venture-backed entrepreneur for many years, which often, means it's a 24/7, 365 commitment for multiple years.
So I just want to stop there for a second, because I think that there's not enough appreciation for the pressure that comes. So I was speaking with one of the former founders of Shopkeep. His name was David Oak, and David said, you raise $20 million or $30 million, and everyone reaches out and says congratulations. But the realization is that's when the hard work actually begins, because you're on the clock. And I just wanted to hear from you. You said it's a 24/7 job. So could you help contextualize that for what that pressure is?
Yeah, I mean, you are absolutely on the clock. And I think that's right. You raise these large amounts and people think like, oh my goodness, that's something to celebrate. And I'm like, no, that is just the beginning. And that means, yes, the clock has started. And, oftentimes, I think M.Gemi raised over $70 million. I think Rockets of Awesome raised, over $30 million. Now there are big expectations from those investors. They have just invested at a very large valuation, right? And they are looking now to make ideally 5 to 10 times the valuation of what they just invested in. And I think you're balancing, one, you need to make sure that you can keep a performance to even live up to the valuation and expectations at which they invested in. And then, continue that trajectory, all while not, burning through your cash too fast. And I think this is where you often see companies that embark on this journey that have to continue to raise rounds and rounds because I think oftentimes they get stuck a bit in the trap of, one way to make sure that your revenue chart is moving up and to the right consistently is to increase your marketing spend consistently. And, you can do that game for a while, for a bit of time without worrying about whether the economics actually make sense and whether you're building a sustainable business. But then at some point, right, like you either run out of money and, have to raise more money or you go under. And so I think a lot of companies start getting on that treadmill, start burning increasing amounts in marketing to try to get to the milestone. And that just gets them to a place where then they need to raise money still yet again at a higher valuation. It just further turns up the speed of that treadmill.
So thanks for taking the time to explain that, because I think that's really crucial. So here you are about to be a new parent.
Yes.
And sorry that I interrupted there.
No. I'm about to be a new parent. I was always open to I knew I loved working in early stage company building prior to becoming a parent. And I was open to maybe, I'm going to give birth to this child and say, oh my goodness, I want to, spend every waking hour, raising, a good human being, which is also very important work. I then gave birth and fortunately or unfortunately for me, I realized I still loved early stage company building. I still loved working. But I developed a really deep-seated desire to do more personally meaningful work. I think all of a sudden now I had a child and the time was very precious. I think every, working so many hours before is sort of like having the start of that family, it was just a lot easier. And I felt like there was less that I was giving up. And now I felt like the bar just got higher and I just wanted to do work that was more meaningful. And I think I'd also, at that point had launched 5 businesses. And I think the energy and excitement I used to get from the challenge of bringing a new brand or new products to market was just not as energizing and exciting for me anymore. I had done it many times and I just needed more. And so, I think it's another point in my life and a career. I decided to just hit pause. I took parental leave, but on the backs of that, I also took an extended sabbatical. I just wanted to step back, step out, really just become, just become a normal person again, become a regular consumer, and just be very open to what it was I was going to do next. And so, I was in this period where I wasn't working. I was channeling all my energy into being, unfortunately, a very type A first-time mother. I was doing a lot of research about all types of things that probably were not necessary. But one was, I breastfed exclusively for 11 months. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And so when I finally transitioned my son to baby formula, it was like a really big deal for me. And I not only researched formula brands, I also decided to look into water quality. I was like, what am I mixing this formula with? How clean is New York City tap water? Am I better off using bottled water? And that's when I was horrified to learn that regardless, whether you drink tap water or bottled water, our water contains hundreds of pieces of microplastic per liter. And it's incredibly difficult to impossible to filter out. And that just crushed me. And that was horrifying to me. And unfortunately, it wasn't until that point and this was about 6 years ago, that I really started connecting the dots between all the single-use plastic that we consume as a society and how it's ending up in our waterways and our oceans, breaking down into tiny pieces of plastic that are too small to be filtered out, and now showing back up in the food we eat, the water we drink, and the baby formula that I was making my son. And I took the next natural step to be like, okay, I need to at least do my part, knowing what I do now. And as a family, really embarked on trying to cut out as much single-use plastic as we could. And that was a really eye-opening experience, just as, a really well-intentioned consumer that wanted to do good, wanted to make this commitment, and it just seemed impossible to do. I mean, you walk into a grocery store and, whether it's ketchup or vitamins or hand soap in your cleaning products, just like everything comes packaged in single-use plastic. And yeah, I think that was kind of the beginning of my story with Blueland.
It's interesting that at the beginning of your business career, you wanted to start a business, and then you came up with the idea, and here you are years later, an idea, not necessarily looking for a business, but you come up with, here comes an idea that actually pops in, and now you start a business. So, but you know nothing about plastics, and you're not a scientist. So
no, nothing about plastics, nothing about nothing about science, certainly, in terms of like, I'm not a chemist. And I think there was a long journey there. It wasn't, it didn't go from, okay, I want to tackle single-use plastic to, let's tabletize cleaning products. Again, at that point, I knew how serious of a decision it was to decide to start something, what a short and very long-term commitment it would be. And I wanted to make sure that, it was the right path that I was going down from, both a business perspective as well as an impact perspective. And at that time, I was spending a lot of time with my co-founder of Blueland. We didn't know at that point that we would end up coming together to start a business, but he had been also a longtime environmentalist. John lives in Boulder, Colorado, also because his partner, now husband, actually they're married, works at the Rocky Mountain Institute, helping lead the country's transition to clean energy. And yeah, I was spending a lot of time talking to him, talking about climate change. I think, what I learned through my discovery of microplastics led me into like better understanding the climate crisis as well. And at that point, I was like, wow, how am I not spending most of my waking hours trying to set us on another trajectory, given like the window of time seems to be so short and narrowing in terms of how we can like truly, I hate using these words, but I'm going to use it, but avert a climate disaster. And so I was interested in plastic. I was also very deeply interested in climate change. And I think there, when we looked into it, felt like there were a lot of areas where we were making great progress, as a country and as a world, like one being the transition to clean energy, another one being electrification of vehicles. But when you looked at the charts for plastic production projected over the next 10 to 30 years, they were just growing exponentially. And that's when it hit me like, wow, plastic is the oil and gas industry's plan B. Like that is, it is a really important area to tackle. And when we double clicked on plastic, I think, we're really surprised to see that the largest category of both new plastic production as well as plastic waste is single-use plastic packaging. And that's what, kind of gave us further confidence that like, okay, single-use plastic packaging is a really great, impactful place to, try to transition us to a better alternative or solution. And at that point, honestly, we explored a wide range of different ideas. Again, it wasn't just like cleaning products overnight. A lot of, bad ideas.
Like what?
But everything from I remember we were talking to like big retailers about like, would they ever carry like giant vats or barrels of like shampoo and have people bring their own glass bottles to refill them? Obviously, the answer is no. That's probably a bit too much. But also like the first product idea that I was so sure about was toothpaste tablets. So toothpaste tablets, if you're not familiar with, and this was again 6 years ago, it was a very, unknown format. I only knew toothpaste tablets because I was making them for our family because we were like trying to cut out single-use plastic. And at the time, pretty much all toothpaste tubes were not recyclable because toothpaste tubes are typically a plastic aluminum blend, which gives them that flex, but also enables them to not be able to be recycled. And toothpaste tablets are these dry tablets. You put one in your mouth, you chew down a few times, and you start brushing with a wet toothbrush. And then as soon as you start brushing, you get a nice amount of foam. The ones I make, you get a fantastic amount of foam. I was confident we'd get them to a place where they were just as effective as conventional brands. And I thought, like, how is this not a no-brainer? Like, why wouldn't everyone do this for the planet if you can get just as much foam and it's just as effective? And again, I thought, like, we'll package them in paper because they're dry instead of plastic. But it was a really eye-opening experience because, I had 40 friends and family try it for 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, over 80% of them came back and said no, like, to the question of, like, would you make the switch? And, I think that's where we realized that there were certain categories that were easier to change people's behaviors around. And there were other categories where there was just a perceived higher switching cost. So anything that touched your teeth, went in your mouth, like, generally if it touches your face or your hair, people are just a lot more hesitant about change or trying something new or trying something from a brand that they've never heard of, versus categories like spray cleaners, like a multi-surface cleaner or a hand soap. People were a lot more open to trying something new.
Presumably, though, in that journey of selection, natural selection of what it was going to be that was the focus, I would imagine you spoke to lots of professionals in the eventual industry that you did decide. And was it this, Sarah? This is a great idea. You're onto something. I don't know why we didn't think of this before.
No. I mean, everyone. I mean, we heard so many no's in the process. So many people also looked at us like we had three heads, and there was just so much skepticism. One being, why have none of the large number of massive billion-dollar CPG companies done this? If this is such a great idea, like, why hasn't it been done before? We approached. The first thing we did was we just, approached close to 40 different cleaning products manufacturers. Because that's usually the natural, like, step. Like, when you have an idea, especially in my background in fashion and beauty, food is the same. There's usually no shortage of contract manufacturers that you can go to, share the concept, and they can help you develop the product. Naturally went to many different cleaning products manufacturers. And again, this is where they all looked at us like we had three heads. Oftentimes pretty condescendingly explaining that they don't even own tableting machinery. And in fact, most of the ingredients come to them as liquid, not dry. And so they don't know how we would then magically turn all these things to a dry tablet. And that ultimately, if we wanted to do this, we would have to create the formula. And, my co-founder, John, and I were both business folks. We met in business school. We were absolutely not chemists. In fact, we sadly learned we didn't even have friends that were chemists, and we didn't have chemists in our network. But, we did the next logical thing. And we just went online and turned to LinkedIn and just started looking for chemists. And that's, how our journey started to find Syed, our chief innovation officer. We reached out to over 100 chemists on LinkedIn, just trying to get anyone and everyone to get on the phone with us to try to, like, point us in a direction, or see if that person could do this. And Syed was like the top of our list, to the extent that he has this very unique, perfect background for Blueland, because he was at the time the head of formulation at Method, which is I think the largest non-toxic cleaning brand in the world. But prior to that, he'd also spent decades in vitamins and probiotics. So he had dry tableting experience. And he was our guy. Like, he was our guy. John and I would talk about Syed before having met him all the time. Like, he was our guy. And we weren't going to take no for an answer. Like, that was just the plan. Obviously, if everything checked out, but pinged him multiple times. I still have the original LinkedIn exchange. It was finally able to convince him to get on the phone with us. After that, made up excuses on why we'd be in San Francisco. He was based in San Francisco, to just create opportunities to meet him in person, and was able to convince him to leave his big, I'm sure, well-paying role to join us to create this thing that we didn't even have yet. He was gonna. Yeah, exactly.
Nor did you know if there was a market for it.
Nor did we know if there was a market for it, nor did we even know it was going to be, possible to create. And even in that journey, I mean, so many times along that journey, I remember thinking like, okay, it's a bust. Like, we're going to have to stop. Like, this is not possible. Now I get why this doesn't exist. And, no one's attempted to launch this.
How did you deal with those no's to the point where it didn't create the self-doubt where it was like, these folks know a lot more about this than I ever will. And maybe it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It's funny. I think I feel for so many reasons. I think part of me hearing the no's, drove me further. I would say I'm a pretty relentless person. And I thought it was almost funny at that point how many times we heard no. Because for me, especially having been a serial entrepreneur, I'm like, oftentimes these things, everything is done for the first time at some point, right? And you can constantly say like, no, this is too hard. But then does that mean we should just all sit on our hands and nothing should ever change because it's too hard? Like, no, we should try, right? And I think I had enough of that context of having been an entrepreneur, having been in the spaces that these things are most oftentimes very hard, right? And so I wasn't deterred by that piece of it. I think also, I think this was the first business that I was deeply and primarily mission driven in the pursuit. And I think that was also really helpful. I think it would have been a very different story if I was doing this purely for financial gain. And, it just didn't make sense how long this would take and how much money I'd put in and how much money I would make on the other side. But for me, it was like, no, I think the whole situation that we are in as humanity and as a planet, right, needs drastic change. And I think unless there are people that are willing to be bold and relentless in their pursuit of that change, nothing's going to change fast enough. And yeah, I think those two things were probably really helpful in terms of just continuing the march forward despite everyone's doubts.
So when you got to the point where you actually had a product to sell, how did you do that? How did you get that to market?
Yeah. So I was also pretty resolute in having us sell on direct to consumer for I had said the first 2 years. We ended up spending our first 3 years purely on direct to consumer. I thought it was really important given what we had created was going to be a brand new format the market had never seen. It was going to be a brand new behavior for consumers. And I mean, we had an offer at launch for one of the largest and arguably one of the most important retailers here in the US. And it was just too risky because, I'm always the biggest believer. The only thing that you really know when you launch something is that you're completely wrong, right? You're going to learn so much in that journey that's going to help you from selling to real customers or attempting to selling to real customers and attempting to market to real customers that will help you refine and perfect your business model. And, I thought that had we gone into that retailer, we weren't going to have that close connection with the customer that you get from D2C. D2C, you have that direct line of communication with that customer to understand what they like, what they don't like. You can test so many things, whether it's on your website, right? Or whether it's on email to really fine tune your understanding of what matters to the customer in what order, what is the right assortment, what is the right pricing. So many different things that are lost when you sell through retail. To sell through retail, you can only put one assortment out there. You have to set the price. You'll never know what would have happened if you had put another assortment and another price out there. You have packaging that's then rolled out in thousands of doors that you can't take back cheaply or tweak easily. And you never know if someone saw you at shelf and walked away, you won't know why. If someone returns a product to that retailer, you unfortunately won't know why. And I thought all of that information is so important for us to hone in on, like, what is the exact right sort of delivery of the system and of the brand. And, there was a lot of education that was going to be required to teach people this new behavior of, like, now you're getting this tablet and you're going to use your own water at home and you're going to drop the tablet in. And again, on a direct to consumer experience, you just have more real estate to be able to do that. You could put videos, if you give me a 2-second video, I can quickly communicate exactly how Blueland works. But when you're on a shelf, you're just sitting there and really, you have to really hope that the customer picks you up and reads the back and, spends that time, when I think on average, you hear that a person walking through a retail store or like a Target or a Walmart will only read 7 words in that entire trip.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had said something when we had started, which was how many millions of bottles you have helped. So can you give that number again, just to give us some sort of context as to where you started, which was 0 with a behavior that nobody ever done, to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Obviously, we started from 0 to, I think in our 3rd year, we had sold over $100 million of product, I think, to date. I've actually lost track. I should know this number. We've sold, tens of millions of products. We've diverted, over, 1 billion single-use plastic bottles, which is really
1 billion?
Billion.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is amazing.
From 4 years ago. I mean, talking about having an impact and started creating an idea from nothing. And so the product lines now are vary, right? You started with one and now you've built out others. So could you give us just
so
where you are now?
So we're in all the major categories in cleaning. So we started with spray cleaners and then hand soap. Then we launched laundry, dishwasher, detergent, countertop dish soap, toilet, compostable sponges, dryer balls, body wash, and face wash.
And if I could ask, is there a next? Is there something next to watch for after that? I mean, there's already so many, but
yeah. I think innovation is absolutely a pillar for the brand. That said, I think we take our approach and try to be as responsible as possible. I think that's also what led us to cleaning products to start with. I have a fashion and beauty background, but it's hard. Obviously, we came from a place where we want to create as sustainable and responsible business as possible. I didn't want to peddle things that I didn't think people need to be buying. And I think that's what we loved about cleaning products, because everyone washes their hands, everyone washes their dishes. It's something that we run out of that we naturally have to replenish. And I think similarly, given our mission, we don't want to launch products that the world doesn't need from us. We have a very high bar for what does the world uniquely need from us as Blueland. What unique skill sets do we have to bring a new product to market? And what does that product look like? And so, definitely no shortage of times people have told me, like, you should launch a shampoo bar, right? Or like a bar soap, and that's going to be plastic free. But the world doesn't need another shampoo bar, and certainly they don't need one from us. And so, we keep that bar high. So when we launch, for example, body wash, I've always been a bar soap user. My husband is always. Americans generally are obsessed with their body wash. It's very strange, like versus like the UK, we are just liquid body wash people. And, that's what our body wash is. It's a powder that you mix with water, you shake it for 10 seconds, and then you get a bottle full of gel body wash. And again, we thought, like, we at least justified to ourselves that was important innovation, because there was a behavior change barrier. It seemed for a lot of consumers to switch to bar soap. And so we thought if we could innovate to deliver a plastic-free gel refill, that would be, a worthy place to spend our time. But yeah, we would definitely have. I would say that again.
No. I was going to say, I fell in love with the product the first time I learned about it, and I try to share it with as many people as I can if they've heard about it or not. So hopefully at the end of this podcast, we've got some new folks who are going to try your product and incorporate it into their own lives. So my question to you was, how do they find your product? Where do they go?
Yes. Thank you for that question. They go to blueland.com. Is the primary and the preferred way that they shop Blueland. That said, we have a range of different products at different retailers. So we're at Target, we're at Costco, we're at Container Store, Erewhon, Meijer, if you're in the Midwest. And we'll be launching in a handful more exciting retailers at the end of this year.
And I always want to give my guests the mic, the platform, if there's anything that you think you'd like to share, whether it be with budding entrepreneurs or those who are in business, or just life lessons that you've taken away that you wish other people either know or you wish you knew then what you know now. So I'd just love to give you the stage.
Wow, that's big and open-ended. I have so many things that I could say. But I think the biggest one is, I think the biggest reminder is that, it's going to be hard, right? It should be hard, right? If you're starting a business and you're starting something new for the first time, of course, it's going to be hard. Like, it's natural for things to not go well, right? And I think you just have to contextualize it as like, you just started. Like, that should be the expectation. I think, like I said early in the podcast, like, my expectation to going into all of my businesses is like, the only thing I can be sure about is that I'm completely wrong. And now I need to be humble enough and rigorous enough and be listening hard enough to then figure it out. I think you should never assume that the idea is perfect. You need many more customers than just you yourself. So you should not be optimizing just for yourself. Really focus on that product market fit before moving. I know there's a huge urge for a lot of founders to shift to marketing. There's a huge sometimes desire to think that just more people need to know about this amazing idea, product, or service. But I would say to start, be patient and really be listening and testing and refining that approach. Because I think, I think it's so much easier to then drive that growth and market effectively and efficiently when you do have that product market fit.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to spend it with us and to share your story. This has been Conversations with Cohen.
This is a lot of fun.